Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Britt Miller. I am the WISE Relationship Manager on our customer service team. I am joined today by Jonathan Wong on our OEA Office of Educational Accountability. He's one of our educational consultants with data reporting, and Courtney Jenkins, our Assistant Director on our special education team. So we have got a great panel of people today for today's session. Thank you all for attending. I see lots of familiar faces, lots of new faces. So thanks for registering and coming to get all the information we have shared for you. So today's session is going to be student data from your SIS to report cards and federal identifications. The point of this session is to go through the primary data flow of how your student data ends up at the, or starts, I should say, at the local level, and how it flows through the WISE applications and ends up on your report cards and getting federally reported. So this is a hot topic, especially this time of year. We want to make sure that those students are where they should be, that you're getting the count credits that you should. So we definitely want to make sure you understand that flow process. So if there are any issues that you run into along the way, you know how to review and correct those. So we're going to start with, like I said, the flow of how the data moves through the applications. I'm going to provide some vendor resources. We were gracious enough to receive some of the big 4 vendors. They provided some details. So if you have access to these slideshows, you will have hyperlinks to those resources. If you are not one of those users of the 4 vendors, I do apologize. This was kind of an opt-in feature, but hopefully your vendors will provide this for you at the local level as well. We are going to go over 4 big topics: enrollment, third Friday of September count inclusion values, economic disadvantage status, and graduation. Within each of these 4 topics, we are going to go through how the data flows. Again, your student information system, through the WISEdata portal, to WISEdash for districts, and where it goes for after that. So starting off, how many of you are familiar with this image or this process? Okay, good. I'm liking the hands I'm seeing. So we start off at your local school, LEA, school, district, whatever verbiage you're using. We have you. This is where your students are. This is where you are. You enter that student information locally into your student information system, okay? This is where you spend most of your time probably during your day. This is your Infinite Campus, your Skyward, Power School, JMC, any of those applications. That's where you're going to enter the information in. Once it's entered into your student information system, it flows through the API and arrives at WISEdata portal. WISEdata portal is the system that we use to monitor and alert you to potential issues with your data. You probably also spend a lot of time in WISEdata portal. This is where you have all those validation messages, where you can review things to make sure that they're populating the way you would expect them to. If that population process goes correctly, that data is then going to flow into WISEdash for districts. How many of you use WISEdash for districts? Perfect, wonderful. WISEdash for districts is actually where your snapshot and report card data is taken from. So we spend a lot of time talking about WISEdata portal, but it's actually WISEdash for districts where the data is captured that ends up going into the OEA report card and the special education joint federal notification magnets. Okay, so WISEdash for districts is a really important part of this process, and I'm really glad that I saw all those hands up because it sometimes gets a little forgotten because it's a little complicated, but I'm hoping I can make that a bit easier for you today. Now, as I mentioned, we do have some vendor resources that were provided by the vendors themselves. The 4 that we have are on the screen. As I mentioned earlier, if you are one of the users of these 4 vendors, that's great. You will have access to some additional resources that were shared with us for this presentation. They are linked in the slideshow, which you can find on our WISEdata conference website page. If these are not one of your vendors, unfortunately, that wasn't information that was shared with me, but I guarantee they also still have documentation. You might just have to ask them directly for it. So I'm going to go through these slides a little quickly because, again, there's not much on them if it's not relevant to your specific vendor tool, but I also just want to be sensitive to kind of proprietary practices. So if you have the slideshow, feel free to go through these yourself. But we're going to start with the WISEdata portal. So the vendor tool resources were used for you at the local level. How do I get to the enrollment information? Where is it located in my local screens? That's what those vendor resource tools were there for. Now let's transition. Okay, we've got it entered locally. What does it look like in WISEdata? This is a WISEdata enrollment record. This is a traditional expected student enrollment record. We don't see any errors on it. We've got the entry enrollment date. We've got the primary school value completed. We've got the grade level, third grade count inclusion values there. Everything looks wonderful. We've got attendance. All the information we need for the enrollment record is here present and accounted for. What happens when it looks like this? This is an overlapping enrollment. How many of you have experienced overlapping enrollments? How many of you know how to deal with them? How many of you don't? Oh, 1, 2. Okay, good. So overlapping enrollments generally happen when a student transitions from one school to another. These could be totally valid enrollment records. It could be that school district A didn't know that the student was leaving until they got notified that there was an overlap in WISEdata, and then they realized, oh, this kid's been missing from our school for a week. This is probably why. Okay, you're not always informed when students are leaving, unfortunately. So these overlapping enrollments are going to be really helpful for you to look at your local records and decide if this student really should be exited, or if maybe the student went to this other school for 2 days and then decided they wanted to come back, and so they're currently sitting in a school chair. So those situations can sometimes need some investigating. But the purpose of an overlapping enrollment is to let you know that there's something going on with the student's record that our system doesn't like. WISE as a system cannot accept what we call concurrent enrollment information. So we cannot accept 2 schools reporting primary services for a student on the same day. Our system will not allow that. So what we do for you is we have this field called effective end date. Our system is going to generate an exit date for that most early enrollment based on the information that we have available. Sometimes this effective end date is correct, sometimes it's not. Our system doesn't know. So we are just doing what we can to make it so your enrollments make sense. If you are this enrollment that had the student start at 9/5, and then on 1/16, this new enrollment came in, and you got this overlapping enrollment, our system is going to say, well, the second enrollment started on January 16th. So by our logic, the first enrollment should be ended on January 15th. Okay, that's what that effective end date logic means. It's a system generated date that we are reporting on your behalf. You do still want to clear this up. If this student really did leave your district, we want you to report the date that they last received service at your school. If the student is kind of bouncing between the 2 of you, that's something we definitely need you to investigate to ensure that that student is getting continuous education. They can only be enrolled in one school at a time for primary services, those types of scenarios. So if you have an overlapping enrollment, I just want to make sure that you know kind of how they show in our system and what the expectation for resolving them is. We also have this column over here on the right side in red. It says overlapping enrollment true value. That's another indicator that there's an overlapping enrollment. And if we go to the export page, we also have a mass enrollment export, and specifically in columns M and Q. If you have nothing populated in column M, SSA exit date, that's you. That's your school enrollment record. If this is blank, but the DPI SSA effective end date is completed with that 11/8 example, let's say, that's where that's another example of where you can see that enrollment overlap happening. Okay, so the student detail screen is great if you have a specific student example you want to look at, but if you're trying to look at your whole population, these exports are going to be really helpful. They're going to give you kind of a broader view to review so you can see all the mass overlappings at once instead of having to go into each student individually. Now, as I mentioned, our system does not like overlapping enrollment. So when we do that effective end date, that means that that is going to impact how your enrollment record goes to WISEdash for districts. We can't have the student counting at the same, at 2 different schools on the same day in WISEdash. So our system is going to end one of those enrollments, and that could impact how that student shows up for you in WISEdash. They may no longer show up for you as a current student because by our system logic, they're not a current student. Their enrollment ended, right? So you may not see a student that you expect to see because that system logic is interfering in a way that you're not expecting it to. And this is going to play into the count values in a little bit, but we're going to come back to the count value topic in just a second. The other thing I want to make sure you're aware of is specifically regarding year-end reporting. If you have a student that has an overlapping enrollment that does not get resolved, and what I mean by doesn't get resolved is I mean one of the enrollment records is open-ended, it doesn't get closed out, that could very likely impact your year-end reporting. Because what happens is you would have an accurate representation of your enrollment record, but you are going to end your enrollment record on your last day of school. Let's say that's June 5th. Because your enrollment record is ending on June 5th and that other enrollment record is still open-ended, our system is then going to say, well, because your enrollment record, this one must be still open. So we're going to actively end it on the last day of the DPI calendar, which is June 30th. That student will no longer show up for you for year end. That means if they were a graduate, you will not get that count. If they were a special education student, you will not get that count. So these are really important to pay attention to and really important to resolve when you come across them. And then this last point here, obviously this can also impact FAE, full academic year, if you have an overlapping enrollment that interferes between the 3rd Friday of September and the statewide assessment testing window. That's obviously going to contribute to a student not showing up in your testing that you would expect.
The reasons why enrollment is important as well is because things for enrollment impact having data in the students that appear on your card as well as the awareness of your. So for achievement and growth, and this is true, that's that in report cards. Link that they buy, another thing, but I could say I may buy the same thing with this presentation. Only those full academic year students. It's a different product apps in the primary area. There are students that have to be for at least 90 days in the school year. And only those 90 days don't need consecutively.
Okay, so transitioning to 3rd Friday of September. A lot of the logic I'm going to talk about for this conversation also is the same for the October 1st count. We're just focusing on 3rd Friday of September because there may be some choice schools in this room as well. So if you have any questions specifically to October 1, feel free to raise your hand and we can address those. Again, we've got the vendor resources that were shared. These are really helpful if you're looking for navigation inside those systems as far as where to find certain values and where these values are housed. And jumping back into the WISEdata portal. So we're looking at this enrollment record again. This is the beautiful, perfect enrollment record that we would love to see. We've got the one enrollment, start date, primary school value, grade level, and we've got this included in 3rd Friday count. It's that's true, right? That's what we all want. Perfect. If you ever open up this enrollment record, there is going to be additional information that's provided. I really encourage you to take a look and see what's recorded under all of these records. Just in case you ever have questions about what exactly we're collecting, if you ever have any validation messages you don't understand, make sure you're opening those records. But specifically under the enrollment section, account inclusion 3rd Friday, and you can see this little box here with the green check mark. This is saying 3rd Friday, September receiving services P. That means present. That means that you indicated the student was present and receiving services on the third Friday. Okay, so if you ever get a validation message that's saying third Friday value missing for a student, this is a really good place for you to come and check. To ensure that that value is being pushed to us, because if you have an overlapping enrollment, you're still going to see that you submitted the third Friday receiving service count as present. But if you have an overlapping enrollment that impacts with that third Friday date, guess what? Your enrollment was not in effect on third Friday, so we're not sending that true value anymore. Okay, so in this example, we've got two schools that are 2 days apart trying to fight over the same students. Maybe this is one school had the student registered, they were there last year, so they expected them to roll over again. They preemptively submitted their enrollment because they thought they were going to show up. Second enrollment is a new city. The student moved over the summer, so they actually have the students enrolled. So they're reporting their enrollment to WISEdata accurately. But if that first enrollment record is in here and they're trying to just, send everybody through, get the enrollments registered, get the third Friday account set up as early as possible, they're going to be trying to send this P for present. And our system is going to say, no, because we have a secondary enrollment record, we're going to effectively end date your enrollment to when theirs starts. And you're no longer going to get that third Friday value. Okay. The flip of that is maybe you're the district that has this scenario. Maybe this is you. And you're saying, no, that kid's been with us since the 5th of August. He's our student. He's present. I have attendance being reported for him. He's been here almost every day. Unfortunately, in this scenario, you're not going to get his third Friday value. So what do? You have to communicate with the other school. You reach out to them. You say, hey, I have an overlapping error in WISEdata. Is this student present at your school? If not, please ask that they remove the student from WISEdata. If the student is there and they're bouncing back and forth, you're going to have to figure out what to do with that. Okay, you can submit a help ticket to DPI. We can give you some guidance, but just for your own knowledge and information, a student cannot be concurrently enrolled in more than one school for primary services. So sometimes we run into this with like custody scenarios, right? Mom lives in District A, dad lives in District B. They want kid to go to District A for 3 days of the week, District B for 2 days of the week. Can't do that. So if you have any of those scenarios, please reach out to us on customer service. We can kind of help walk you through that. But because that is not something that is allowed, if you are seeing an overlapping enrollment in WISEdata, please work to address it. Again, we've got that mass enrollment export available to you. There's columns AE and AF. This is going to say the DPI count inclusion for third Friday in October 1. If you see a false in here, that means you're not getting the counts. Our system is not allowing you that count due to the dates that are currently being recorded and collected. Okay. Now, if you ever have any questions about these columns, because sometimes when you open these enrollments or these exports, they can be a little overwhelming. A lot of information, there's a lot of columns, you don't always know what they mean. So if you ever go next to the download button, there's this definitions hyperlink. If you click that, it's going to give you a definition of what every single one of these columns means. So if you were looking at this and you're like, well, my third Friday counts as true, but the DPI third Friday counts as false, what's the difference? That would be another handy tool for you to take a look to get what we're trying to tell you with that expert. WISEdash for districts. Remember, if that student has an overlapping enrollment date and your record is effectively end dated, this student is not going to be counted. They're going to be one of these no's. So if you ever look at this WISEdash for districts third Friday count enrollment dashboard and you see no's here, like in this example, that's probably what's going on. These are students that have enrollments, but they're not being included for whatever reason. So when you're reviewing your information, you want to make sure that this DQI data quality indicator box total has what you expect your third Friday count to be. And if it doesn't, you can come to the cross tab here and you can investigate that further. These crosstabs are really great because you can apply different filters to them, so you can disaggregate the information in a way that's more manageable for you. Let's say you know your count is off by 10 students. How do you find those 10 students? Well, how about we drag over the data quality indicator for schools? Let's break it down by school. If you find out you're missing 3 kids from one of your elementary schools and 7 kids from one of your middle schools, that's better than having to go through 5,000 students individually, right? So these dashboards are really helpful for you to be able to figure out what data is incorrect and then resolve the issue that way. Also, just a quick note, anything that is underlined in any of these dashboards is a hyperlink. So in this example, if I wanted to know who those particular 2 students were that are not being included in my third grade account, I can click this underlined no and it would tell me the specific names of those 2 students. So again, we're trying to make this as easy for you as possible with the tools that are available.
SQL students are going here in one very prominent place on the worker on the front page. Here's an example snippet from an example sample report card. That enrollment count there, 450, this would be for TMS. In addition, which is not a snippet, there's like demographic variables. This is some donut charts, some Pringle charts. I think these are from Wisconsin appropriate. Those percentages come from students that would go to this TMS. Yes. Pretty consistent.
Hi, everyone. Well, I want to address one of the burning questions that I noticed pretty good and I'm just thinking about that. But that is, why is there an October 1 update and why don't we just use that third Friday, right? It keeps me up at night too. Well, here's the answer. It's because in federal law, we are required to count students with disabilities by IEPs between the dates of October 1 and December 31st. And when the law was passed in 2004, the Department of Education, and said that is less than 2 weeks away from when we do this for state student count. Is there any way we can use that? And I said no. So that's why we have the child update, which is a separate date for students with disabilities. And that date and the data that's pulled from that child count is the data that we use to identify districts and charters that have what is called significant racial disproportionality in special education. And that data is used then for us to connect the data and the district into the budget software, which is WISE grants for districts. And we reserve by, because of federal law, then we reserve 15% of the federal special education funds to specifically address that racial disproportionality. So that's why this data, enrollment data in particular, third Friday in September child count data is critical for us in the world of special ed. And what happens is, because it is part of federal law, when there is data that's either invalid or inaccurate, then we work with districts on 3 years to have to manually fill that and submit that to us at the program level. So paying attention to it on the front end reasons.
Thank you. Okay, so how are we feeling on the enrollment information and third Friday count October 1 inclusion that we just discussed? Are there any questions about anything that I went over? Do we need anything clarified? Okay, so what you're saying is I'll never see another overlapping. Yeah, question. Yeah, great question. What happens when you have an overlapping enrollment that has the exact same start date for both records? I don't know if I've ever actually seen an example of that, but I can recall off the top of my head, but I think our system would probably just take whichever one was submitted first and date that one, because we would see that as the older record. Would be my assumption. So it still would kind of have the same process though, as long do you get editing and the other one? So, yeah. Yeah, good question. What happens when you're trying to resolve the overlapping and we just can't get it done? A couple different scenarios that fall into that. Sometimes it really just can't be resolved. Sometimes you have those scenarios where a student is in one school for the first half of the day and they're in another school for the second half of the day. Somebody's gonna have to relinquish that day if they want to get the overlap resolved into a day. Sometimes you do have those concurrent enrollment scenarios, like the custody agreement that I just talked about. The only way that that would work is if you actually had a court order. Very unfortunate. I hope we don't have any kids in that scenario, but it does come up where the judge rules kid has to be in District A for the first 3 days of the week, District B for the second day. In those types of scenarios, we do have some guidance that I could provide you. I don't really want to get into it right here. It's not super common, but if you do have those scenarios, feel free to put a help ticket. We can help walk you through what options you have. But I think the crux of your question is what happens if those overlaps just can't get resolved for a SIS issue? Someone in the front office just maybe is new. They don't quite know what to do in that scenario. They're not quite sure which buttons to click. We're running in crunch time, snapshots in 2 days. How do we make sure this gets fixed? Well, our WISEdata team actually just recently implemented an overlapping enrollment feature. No. I don't want this to be a yay, let's celebrate all our overlapping enrollments to fix, okay? This is a new feature that we are creating simply for the use in those scenarios where both schools agree on a date that the overlap should be resolved, and for whatever reason, the system just is not updating. Okay, so this is, you're trying to resolve an overlap with another school. The other school is like, yes, this student should be exited on this day. I don't know why my data is not flowing. I can't get this corrected. Send it to customer service. We will have a way to fix that on our end. You will still see the error. It's not going to necessarily be resolved on your end, but for the collection purpose of snapshot and in WISEdash, it will be fixed to the way that it's agreed on. Okay, this is not necessarily something that says we're fighting over who had attendance for this kid on the same day. I need DPI to make a decision. Okay, that is not my job. I don't want that job. So we do have this tool available. If you have a scenario like that, please feel free to send it to us. But unfortunately, because the majority, I usually say all, but now that we have this new feature, I kind of let the cat out of the bag. Majority of all your data needs to be reported from your student information system. If your student information system is not sending an update to us and you cannot agree on how the issue should be resolved, might just have the overlap and the cards are just going to have to play out how they play. It's not a perfect system. We understand that students are transient. They bounce back and forth. They're not always consistent in where they're attending and where they're showing up and at what times. We understand that. But our system, unfortunately, is a black and white system. We can't always make allowances within our validation logic for those scenarios. So some of those overlaps just may not get resolved. And that's kind of just the way that the system is put together, and that's just kind of life, unfortunately. Okay, now that I've disappointed everyone, we're gonna move on. So economic disadvantage status, we've got our vendor resources here. Wonderful, beautiful. They are so helpful and encouraging. Once we get to WISEdata portal, I want to make sure everyone's aware that the economic disadvantage status that's reported for a student in WISEdata is made up of 2 different elements. It is the economic status on a student's demographic record. This is collected through CEP, alternative income forms, that sort of process, and it is also collected and calculated using the food service eligibility record. So those are 2 separate fields, and they combined will report how your student has their income disadvantage status. When we talk about the economic status on a student's demographic, I am talking about this in WISEdata. So under the demographics and school level, there's a value that says characteristics. This is going to be what that alternative income, household income or that which is was it? Not CP. Just lost. The thing you do at the beginning of school where you get the kids' income from the family.
Free reduced. Free and reduced parts.
No. Direct certification.
Same thing.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have been doing too many of these and I'm getting all jumbled up. Thank you for being patient with me. Okay, this is your direct certification form. Result. This is what comes through on the student's demographic, okay? So if the student's direct cert says they're economically disadvantaged or not economically disadvantaged, this is where that value is going to be showcased. You can also find this in the demographics characteristics export. Okay, I've got a picture of where the column is. It's broken up into Y and Z. Economically disadvantaged, true. Not economically disadvantaged, true. If you ever have a question about, if you ever get like a data quality call from our customer service team saying your economic disadvantage percentage rate has changed, this is where we are going to direct you to review that because that's where we are reviewing it from. Okay. When we talk about the food service eligibility record, that is a separate record. This is that free and reduced income form. Thank you for reminding me of that preemptively as well. This is going to be that full price, free, reduced, whatever value that student qualifies for food service. Got another export here. It's under programs, food service, and you can see in column L that you will have those options reported as well. Yeah.
Can they qualify by either of those, or do they have to qualify by both?
That's a great question. Here's your answer. So the reason why we use both of these values is because we have a calculation. Okay, so here's that food service record value. Here's the economic disadvantage demographic value. You can see from this table that depending on how they match up, it is going to dictate their FRAN or their economic disadvantage status that we captured during snapshot. The reason why we use both is because how many people in this room are part of a CEP school? Few hands. Okay, so for those of you that aren't familiar, CEP schools are basically schools that provide free lunch to all of their students. There's no like lunch program, all of the students get free lunch. However, just because a student is attending a CEP school does not necessarily mean that they are economically disadvantaged by default. That is why we collect both values. If you are a CEP school and you provide free lunch to your students, but that student's direct cert indicates that they are not an economically disadvantaged student, they are not an economically disadvantaged student for snapshot reporting and for report cards. Okay, so that's why we have both. If you do the free and reduced form and that student is a reduced lunch price and their direct cert indicates that they are economically disadvantaged, then they're eligible for reduced lunch and they would qualify. That's why we need both values, because we need to calculate them together to dictate how the student reports to the state. And again, I have the export paper trail up there. We've got the enrollment export itself. And there's the particular column that you would look at to review how they're being calculated on DPI's end. We also have the economic status filter available on majority, if not all, of our dashboards. Are any of you missing this economic filter in WISEdash? If you are in WISEdash for districts and you are not seeing econ as an available data filter in these columns on your crosstabs, it means that you do not have the correct user role assigned to you. If you are someone that is responsible for reviewing this information for accuracy and you don't have that filter available, please reach out to your application administrator and request that they upgrade your access to economic indicator analyst. That is the user role that you will need. It's kind of hard to review this data if you don't have access to it. So if you don't see it, that's why. So once we pull that econ filter over, you can see we just break it down to not econ disadvantaged and econ disadvantaged. I also, in this example, pulled over grades, so I can see all the different grade variations, and it just kind of gives me a better visual to make sure that everyone's being accounted. Okay, so in this example, I can see that there are 3,500 students in my school that are economically disadvantaged. Does that number sound correct? Does that match my local reports? If it doesn't, I'm gonna need to investigate who's missing. Or the alternative, who's being reported in a way that they shouldn't be. Yes. Yeah. If direct certification or that alternative household income form does not qualify them as economically disadvantaged on the demographic, regardless of their lunch, they're not going to be reported as economically disadvantaged.
Economic disadvantage status is a big one for reporters. We get a lot of questions. So this is on the right, there's a snippet of that example card that I was talking about earlier. This is just a little lower on the page. Again, those demographic characteristics are listed on the student standings there. Economic disadvantage is going to be that middle donut or premium chart here. In this example, report card, there's 43.8% of students that qualify as economically disadvantaged. And the reason why that's so important is that state statute requires a variable weighting based on the percent of economic disadvantaged students that are in a school or district. A higher percent we see being weighted more towards growth, and the lower percent we see being weighted more towards achievement. You can see those priority area weights again here on the same report card, achieved in the dark blue, in the dark blue. This gets a little bit complicated depending on the exact configuration of the course or district. If you're interested in finding out more about how those exact weights are calculated, there is a current weighting calculator that's available on our website. There's a link here. Feel free to go to that. There's a slide on our just how the students are disadvantaged in your school district. There's other icons to click on that page as well, depending on which priority areas the card applies to the school district. Economic disadvantage status is also in for ESSA, so this is the major federal accountability law. In particular, that law requires that data be disaggregated in a number of subgroups. So there are racial subgroups, which are listed here. With this example, is accountability report. There's also service provision groups that we disaggregate, in particular economically disadvantaged English learners and students with disabilities. So the student is counted as being economically disadvantaged, that their data is weighted to that economically disadvantaged student. It appears in those ESSA accountability reports and contribute to ESSA identifications. Just in general, so you know, there are 3 different ESSA identifications available. There is a CSI comprehensive support identification that would go to an all students or to the school wide. There are also identifications that are geared towards schools that have student groups that are performing in lowest end of the distribution or on a comparative state funding basis. Those are the ATSI and TSI identifications, and those can be made again, on the basis and composition of nationwide those student groups such as listed under different students. Including the students.
Okay, rounding it out with our last topic, we have a question first. Okay, so the student has to qualify for economically disadvantaged. They have to have some sort of proof, I guess, is how you could think of it. So that direct certification or that alternative income household form, those are going to be, well, you can only do one. One is okay. It's either or, whichever way they qualify for economically disadvantaged, either of those options. Either one, yeah. Yeah. No, a regular free and reduced lunch app would not qualify them as economically disadvantaged. Or the alternative income household form. It's something choice schools use a lot. Okay, so, graduation. So she is beauty, she is grace. Beautiful resources here. So for students to count as a graduated WISEdata, similar to econ status, they are going to require two different values. That HSC on their exit for the enrollment record and the academic credential record. The exit record is going to be on that enrollment. You are going to have that little exit section. If you open the enrollment record up, this is where you're going to see what's submitted for the exit type. And the term completion indicator is going to indicate true or false as well. This is something that you just let us know. Did the student complete the school term? Whether that's at the end of the year, whether they're an early graduate, but they've completed everything they needed to for that school term, that's where that value comes in. At the very bottom of a student's profile in WISEdata, there's going to be this category called academic record. This is the actual diploma record that needs to be reported. Sometimes when we're doing data quality outreach, it's because people are submitting that HSC exit, but they're not only completing out this academic record. So it's important that you know what this is and how to review it. This is where we are looking for that diploma earned. We want to know that they obtained the diploma, and then we want to know what type of diploma they received. A couple different options. Most often you're going to use a regular diploma, but there are a couple others that are available as well. Sorry? The high school completion date and the date, the diploma received date, yeah, those can be different. We have an export as always. I hope that you guys are going to be using these exports since I took all the time to write out every single instruction and breadcrumb for you. But we have a high school completion export. Columns O and P are going to be the ones you want to review. We want to make sure that term descriptor annual is going to be what you report since the annual diploma. Even if a student graduates early, they're graduating for the year, which is the annual diploma descriptor. So annual is going to be reported for the term, and then this diploma type is where we see issues with data quality. We want to make sure that diploma type is coming through. If I call you and I say your graduation rate is low, and we look at this export, chances are this diploma type column is going to be blank. So make sure you know in your student information system where that diploma value needs to be entered and then how to push that to WISEdata, because that's something that we commonly see on customer service prior to snapshots. Your students will not be counted as graduates unless that diploma type is submitted correctly. In WISEdash for districts, oh yeah, good catch. So your early graduates are not showing in WISEdash correctly. They're not showing as graduates. Okay. I know we've had some. Okay, I know that we've discovered a few WISEdash issues this conference, so it could be, there seems to be something going on with the data flow from data to WISEdash in some particular areas, so I will make a note and get that investigated. Letting you know. In WISEdash, we do have a graduation, a high school completion dashboard. There's a couple different items within this dashboard topic. The first is going to be the exits and retention crosstab. This is where you can verify that all those HSCs you're submitting are coming through correctly. If you know you have 500 students in your graduating class, but you're only seeing 400 HSCs, you're gonna want to figure out what's going on. If we scroll a little further down on that dashboard page, we're gonna get to another one that says high school completions for grad cohort 4-year rate. This is going to tell you of those HSCs, I'm sorry, not HSCs, of your 12th grade students, how many of them are completing and receiving a regular diploma? How many of them are not completing but expected to come back the next year? How many are not completing, but we don't know if they're coming back? And then unknown values for 12th grade students that may not have an exit type reported correctly. Okay, now I want to make a quick note on this grad cohort. It says 4-year or less. When we are looking at WISEdash for districts, we are only looking at your 4-year cohorts. What does that mean? That means that if you have a student that took 5 years to graduate, they are not going to be represented in your WISEdash snapshot dashboards. If you're looking specifically at your 4-year cohort, so if you notice a student is missing or your rate is slightly different than what you expect based on your graduating class, if you have students that took more than the expected 4 years to graduate, they're not going to be included in this calculation. We do have that information available under the topics area. We've got the 4-year rate, the 5-year rate, 6-year rate, 7-year rate, so you can review them in the topics area. But I just want to make you all aware that for the snapshot purpose, where it says 4-year graduation rate, 4-year or less cohorts, we really are talking about those students in a traditional 4-year cohort.
On the right, you can see again another simple snippet from this example report card. It's for graduation rates. The most importantly to remember that graduation rates from the report card and as accountability is that the students that have that are regular diploma type education rate times most let's say when graduation rate may be a point or two higher than what it is. Go ahead, take a look at the performance that you submitted for each graduating student and make sure that that match your expectation of what they should know. In particular, another thing to keep in mind is that when you're scoring in 7-year cohort graduation rates, they're used for scoring SF and report card. In particular, just wanted to note that point probably should update that thing. But in general, students are included in rates for district or school with accountability. So first example, if a student is placed by their IEP in another school, so like an example is for the schools, one blind visually impaired those students will still clear a graduation rates at their resident districts. If you have particular kinds of students that would be considered jail, that gets a little tricky. That's a little too complex to put on the language of this slide. So if you have particular questions on those scenarios, feel free to reach out to my office and get those questions answered for you. CCDev, yes. CCDV, I've always heard them CCDevs, but yes, the other. In general, yes, there can be some particular situations or scenarios that come up that when you have to do so again, if you have a particular question, Feel free to reach out to us. Happy to get those questions answered. Special situations.
About 3 or 4 years ago, we at the state level decided to make calculations for each of the school districts that are required in federal law for LEA determinations. Those were about 3 or 4 years ago, those were all compliance of all districts are meeting requirements of that. And that was really a mismatch to the reality on the ground. Kids with diabetes really different outcomes in terms of academic outcomes, in terms of behavior, in terms of graduation. And so we shifted and started to include important markers of educational success in our calculations for every school district and charter school as it relates to an LEA determination. And that's what we discovered, that there were bumps in the data, graduation data for kids with IEPs in a lot of school districts. So if this was going smoothly for you all or everything was fine, and then a couple of years ago it started to get really bumpy, the reason why is because we changed our reporting line at the state level. And one of the first things that school districts started to do was take in their data and realize that the way in which they were calculating supporting graduation for kids with disabilities and IEPs was creating artificially low graduation rates. And then when we looked at the data in WISEdash in the WISEdata table. So that's where you're hearing a little bit more about graduation rates as it relates to kids with IEPs. And so in particular, just remind folks that the special ed exit date need to match so that the SECR end date is the same as you. And that would be really helpful on the front end so that it's not what districts are kind of on.
Okay. So final thoughts as we wrap the session up. Make sure that you are reviewing WISEdash for districts. We pointed out a few times, WISEdash for districts is where your snapshot is actually captured from. That is where the report card is looking at your data from snapshot. That is where IDEA qualifications are coming from, is from WISEdash for districts. So if that is not already a very prominent part of your data review process, please wrap that into it, okay? If you have questions, if you have concerns about WISEdash for districts, you can always reach out to us on customer service. We are happy to set up a time to go through it, review, train, whatever you need. But we want to make sure that everyone understands the importance of reviewing those WISEdash for districts counts. If something does not look correct in WISEdash for districts, we often see districts go immediately to their student information system. Then I get an angry email or a ticket that says, my campus system says this, but your system's wrong. I love those. If something in WISEdash does not look correct, we need to take one step back in the data flow process and look at WISEdata portal. WISEdash pulls from WISEdata portal. If something doesn't look correct in WISEdash, it's probably because something's going on in WISEdata portal. So we want to make sure that we understand WISEdash is wrong. Let's look at what's going on in WISEdata. Okay. There could be a number of issues. It could be that there's an error preventing your data from flowing to WISEdash. That's why your student information system looks correct. It's because it technically is, but there's something else impacting the data. It could be that we're missing a value that you entered in your local information system, but hasn't been updated or pushed to WISEdata yet. Okay, so we have to make sure we're looking at WISEdata portal to see if we can figure out where the anomaly is there. Then you take it back to the local level to make any corrections or updates you need. Often you've already made the correction, we just haven't received it. So you just have to do a simple resync. And when in doubt, do a resync from your information system to WISEdata and run a validation. 75% of the time that'll fix your problem. So that's the data flow. We went the other direction. We went student information system to WISEdata to WISEdash to report cards. It tracks the same way back. WISEdash is wrong, let's go to WISEdata. WISEdata may be wrong, we're gonna go to our local information system. Use those exports because I put a lot of time into them. And I want to make sure that you are using everything that is available to you. Those exports are there for your benefit, okay? If you are not getting the information you need, if you think it could be done better, please let us know. We want them to be useful for you. If they're not useful, we want that feedback so we can make it better. But use those exports. You can filter down to get the exact chunk of students you want to make sure that their data is reporting the way you expect it to. It's going to be a really beneficial tool for you to use. And then lastly, I already mentioned, but please make sure you are looking at your student information system and resyncing if something is not matching up. Okay, so this wraps up the session, the presentation portion. For those of you that are heading out, please feel free to scan the QR code, provide your feedback on the session, provide your feedback on me. Please do not mention that I forgot the word direct certification earlier. That would be really embarrassing. And if we have any other questions, myself and Jonathan and Courtney will stay if we have any questions that the group wants to discuss further, or we can do one-on-one support. But we thank you all for attending. Enjoy your lunch and have safe travels if you're heading back. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your conference.
I have a question. Do you want to take a break first?
No, I gotta stop recording because otherwise whoever's watching this on YouTube later is gonna hear me talking and they're gonna be like, what is she doing?
Oh, that's on YouTube.
Well, we record them all and then, and then we put them all on YouTube.